Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Want to get right to the Newsmaker Hotline. Say hello to Congressman Scott DesJarlais. And Congressman, it was a big day, last couple of days actually, in Washington, D.C. Vladimir Zelensky was there wagging his, what I would say is crooked little finger at members of the Senate and the House, demanding that he gets his, many, many billions of dollars. And I guess my question to you is, he left Ukraine apparently without the money. Mitch McConnell is saying that coming up with some sort of a deal is nearly impossible at this point. Reflect on the last couple of days, if you would, from your vantage point.
Okay. Well, of course, this is supposed to be the last week we're in session before the Christmas holidays, so everything gets jammed into one final week, and it's pretty chaotic. Zelensky coming in just kind of added more flavor to the process. But as a member of House Armed Services Committee, I get monthly briefings, classified briefings on the Russia-Ukraine war, and we just had one yesterday. And it's really pretty amazing that they being the Biden administration, continue to ask the American taxpayers to fund a war that has essentially no strategy for winning. And we tend to get into these endless wars. And, it's amazing we're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of the Russia invasion. And basically they're, without divulging too much information, are just wanting to fund a stalemate for at least an additional year. So, I have always tried to be supportive of the effort to stop Russian aggression, to degrade the Russian military. But I can tell you there was bipartisan questioning of the Pentagon and the secretary that was sent to brief us about what the strategy is, how the money's being spent, and there was clearly frustration that without some type of a clear strategy to win, or at least to get to the negotiating table to end this war, it's going to be pretty hard to get more funding, especially when we all see the lack of security at our own border.
Congressman Scott DesJarlais joining us. The president had that press conference with Zelensky yesterday, and he was actually asked the question, I believe it was a foreign journalist, but he was actually asked a question about whether or not Zelensky has to show some sort of a plan, some sort of a strategy to end this war, this never-ending war. And so this is how President Biden answered the question. Of course, we know that he reads off of notes, and he was very specific in how he was literally reading off the notes. He knew the question, and he had the answer written down in front of him. This is what he said.
Well, let me answer the question first. Let's put this in perspective. Remember how far Ukraine has come. Russia's failed us.
Now, he was asked specifically, Congressman, he was asked specifically about the strategy. What is the strategy that would justify giving Ukraine more money? And the president spent a minute and 15 seconds
Ukraine can export grain and steel to the world,
literally not answering the question about strategy. He talked about, supposed accomplishments. As a matter of fact, what I would say he did is he read from the talking points and the press release and the propaganda of Vladimir Zelensky. In other words, the president doesn't know about any kind of strategy. It's just a blank check. And the Biden administration, it's almost like they're not even curious about a possible strategy.
Well, let me tell you this. I visited Ukraine in 2017, and we were anticipating that Russia could invade at that point. They took Crimea in 2014, and they basically have occupied the same territory they're occupying now under these war conditions back then. So when I went there, we could go as far west as Dnipro, but not further, because the Russians were occupying that territory in, I guess, what would be eastern Ukraine. And so nothing has really changed. The invasion was halted. They didn't get to Kyiv. But Zelensky acts like the only path to success is to kick Russia completely out of Ukraine and take back Crimea. That's not going to happen without major escalation. It would take air power. It would take, probably boots on the ground on our part. The Ukrainian military has been degraded as well. They don't have as many people to plug back in like the Russians do. Russia would have to escalate to go beyond the current line. So the logical thing to do would be, okay, this didn't work out for either side. Let's just go back to the 2017 status quo and quit killing people and quit spending everybody's money. And I think that's ultimately what we need to be pushing for.
Congressman, I've got to ask this as well. When you look at what is going on with Ukraine and with Israel, and of course what is happening, you just mentioned, on our southern border, are you prepared for, if ultimately Vladimir Putin, who has all the time in the world, he could just wait this whole thing out, are you prepared for the criticism that will come by way of the Democrats and the media if Putin ultimately ends up taking some land from Ukraine? Are you prepared to deal with the criticism that will come from that, and how big of a deal will that be?
You've got to look at the situation as it unfolds. Putin's hurting too. He can pretend like he's winning, or Ukraine can pretend like they're winning, but both sides have lost heavily. I think that Europe is involved and invested in this, as they should be. It's in their backyard. The United States certainly is leading and spending the most money, but I think that Ukraine can continue to basically maintain this status quo. We have been giving money to Ukraine since 2014 through the NDAA to kind of maintain their borders, and I don't think that Zelensky's strategy is realistic. So again, I can deal with whatever criticisms we need to. It's my job to fund our military and make sure that we're secure and we support our allies. So, what we want from the Pentagon, what we want from the White House is, what exactly are we doing with this money? What is our end goal? And we made that very clear to the panel yesterday in a bipartisan fashion that, they're going to have to come up with some answers. And we told them to take this information back to the White House and tell them, before we continue to fund this process, what is the end game? And so, I think Americans could probably deal with it too if they say, okay, here's our strategy.
Yep.
This is what we want to do. This is what we got to spend or not spend. And just be honest with us. Let's be clear. Let's not have this vague suckhole of taxpayer dollars with no end game in sight.
Honesty from the Biden administration?
Right.
Congressman, switching gears to the Hunter Biden and the Joe Biden debacle, the House is going to vote to formalize the Biden impeachment inquiry today. Nancy Pelosi, in a hard-hitting interview on CNN, said this about Speaker Mike Johnson and the inquiry.
He says he has no choice. The fact is he has no respect. No respect for the Constitution of the United States, no respect for his own members, whom he's asking to vote for an impeachment with no basis. With no basis.
She feels so strongly, she said no basis twice. I don't know, when you've seen the evidence, and we all here at WTN cover the evidence, you certainly know what's out there as well. It just seems like to say that there's absolutely no basis for an impeachment inquiry just seems delusional, but we are talking about Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, I saw her walking down the hall yesterday with a sack of lemons. I don't know what that was all about. But, yeah, we're doing this by the book, and the White House was complaining that we can't get documents we need and we can't interview people we want to interview without a formal impeachment inquiry. So we'll give them what they want today. I'll actually be managing debate from the chair today from 12 to 2 Eastern while we debate the rule on this. So if you're really bored, you can tune in. But it's ironic that Nancy would say that, because they basically impeached Trump for having the audacity to expose the Biden family influence peddling scheme that was going on in Ukraine. So he gets impeached for what ultimately Biden, among other influence peddling schemes in China and elsewhere, were committing. And it's got to be very vindicating for Trump as we march down this investigation and see that Biden goes on TV, denies having any interaction with Hunter Biden's business partners while he's golfing with them, while he's sitting at dinner with them, while we look at the White House records, while we see checks that were made out to Joe Biden while Hunter pays $50,000 in rent to stay at his dad's house. You know, the evidence is just smoking everywhere. And this is what impeachment is for. I hate that so many of our weapons our tools in the House have become weaponized, whether it's impeachment or censorship or expulsion. But in this case, you have a president who's compromised, clearly. The evidence is overflowing, and we're going to take a step today to do the process as it was intended to be done, get the evidence, and I think at the end of the day, you're going to see that all this is not smoke and mirrors, but indeed President Biden has probably committed an impeachable offense.
One last question here, and I don't have a lot of time, but it's one of the bigger news stories of the day. Apparently, President Joe Biden last night is indicating that he doesn't feel like Benjamin Netanyahu should be leading Israel anymore. And he also said behind closed doors that support for Israel worldwide was softening in the wake of the indiscriminate bombing that Israel is carrying out. He keeps saying these things behind closed doors. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, President Biden seems incredibly weak-kneed at the moment.
Well, I got to believe he gets better briefings than I do. And coincidentally, I had a classified briefing from the ambassador from Israel and one of their top generals yesterday. Israel is probably the most surgical when it comes to preventing collateral damage. And what they've done in Gaza is totally warranted. The fact that they were able to get hostages released was because of the pressure campaign that Biden was telling him to ease up on. They've got to rid Hamas. They're as bad as ISIS. They've got to get them out of Gaza. They have no intention of occupying Gaza. They want the Palestinians that live there to control their own government. Hamas has been in charge since 2006. And they're a terrorist organization. They're funded by Iran. Biden should be focusing on further sanctions and not giving money to Iran because they're the ones that are paying these terrorists around the country, whether it's Hezbollah in Lebanon or Houthis in Yemen or Hamas in Gaza. So we need to be cracking down on Iran. We need to be supporting our ally Israel. This impacts all of us. And if somebody was telling us how to conduct our war, we'd tell them to go pound sand. So Biden needs to stay out of it. Israel's very capable. They're succeeding. They've got a strategy. And I don't know why he's bound down to the pressure that's coming from this majority of people crying humanitarian. I feel for innocent civilians that get caught up in war. It's a very condensed population area, very difficult, and I think nobody does it better than Israel when it comes to documenting and making certain that they're doing the very best they can to protect innocent lives.
All right, Congressman, thank you very much for joining us here on Nashville's Morning News on WTN.